Hey everybody, welcome to What Drives Us, episode 365 for May 6th, 2020. My name is Russell Frost, and I am your host on this week's journey into modern mobility and sustainable energy. Look at this panel. Look at this panel. I am so overwhelmed. And luckily for me, I just have to host. I have to introduce them and just kind of stand out of the way. They're gonna do the rest of the work. So I'm just gonna smile and take credit for it because that's what I do. Let's introduce this panel again on the road. My wingman, our friend with the beautiful backdrop in the beautiful Midwest, Mr. Tony Schaefer.
Hey, everybody. Yes. So, over the weekend, so like 4 days ago, it was 19 degrees in the Chicagoland area. That's 19 centigrade. It was 70-ish degrees, and it is 12 degrees right now. So that's like...
Fahrenheit or centigrade?
We experienced what they call a pneumonia front, which is a drop of 16 or more degrees Fahrenheit in under an hour. And that is something to behold right there. The winds come down off Lake Michigan from Canada, specifically the Kitchener-Waterloo area.
Don't blame us. It's your own damn fault by living in the lake.
So to help myself warm up just a little, I'm recalling a trip I made to beautiful Boulder, Colorado, and Wonderland Lake behind me. It was the middle of summer. It was an absolutely gorgeous week up there. So I'm living vicariously in Boulder this week.
Excellent. Well,
so am I.
It's better than living in the world we have right now. Let's put it that way. I can't blame you for that. Well, and speaking of which, the man to blame for Tony's bad weather from the Kitchener-Waterloo region, I don't think he's really responsible, but you know me.
You guys know that weather goes from west to east, right? So.
Oh, darn it. Mr. Mark Coughlin.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the show. We've got a ton of news. Let's get to it.
We do indeed. My friend in Northern California, she's a writer, a director, a videographer, a woman of so many talents. I don't have the time to even list them all. You know, this is sort of like the introduction to Daenerys on Game of Thrones. You know, there's like a 5-minute long biography. She is the breaker of exercise bans. The blah, you know.
Yes, that was
Georgia McKenzie.
That was very annoying today. Just snapped it right into my face. Good job, Georgia.
Ow.
Ah. Hey, y'all.
There we go. Our friend in lovely Boulder, Colorado, that Tony sort of hinted at earlier with the beautiful blurred out background. The owner of Boulder Hybrids at boulderhc.com, Mr. Paul Guzik.
Hey, glad to be back. And my beer sponsor today is Modus Hopperandi. I don't know if you can see that with the blurry background.
Nice.
Nice.
Unfortunately, it's from the Ska Brewing Company, so any of you 80s Specials fans. Unfortunately, little side story here, Ska Brewing Company opened a fancy new brew distillery in Boulder the day of the lockdown. They were open for 2 hours, and the government shut them down. So when they're open, I'm going to go support them, support local businesses. But that would suck to open a new brew pub and only be open for 2 hours.
Yeah.
That landlord's asking for rent, too.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
landlords will be landlords.
Right up front, man. Right up front. Our friend in the Mid-Atlantic region, he has his own YouTube channel on which he specializes in Tesla superchargers and their Tesla-related issues, Mr. Casey Green.
Yes. So I just came in from downloading and starting the install for software update 2020.12.11.1. So expect a review on that sometime in the near future. And it's not the latest, so I might get another one right after it, which would be really cool. But still newer than what most people are running, so that's always fun to be on the tip of the spear, if you will. My sugar's a little low, so I'm going to be snacking in the middle of the show on mute, so don't think me rude.
Too late.
Get that sugar up, my friend. Get that sugar up. And last, and without question, not least, the man who does all of our news on social media and a huge presence here. Of course, he has the best toys in his background. No fake background for Mr. Patrick Connor.
Hello. I do want to show one thing real quick here. Let's sign of the times. Can you guys see that there? Got the masks, and I've got gloves on, and wearing my cyber hat, my Tesla jacket, sitting in my X, about to go pick up dinner for the family.
You look like a high-tech ninja.
Did you stop at the bank and how much did you get away with?
Yeah, it's
that is a very impressive mask, Patrick.
I actually ordered that mask. Was it 1 year ago or 2 years ago? We had some severe fires here, and so I ordered these masks, and then by the time they arrived, I didn't need it, and so they've just been sitting in our garage. And hey, well, now I had a reason to pull them out, and I also didn't have to feel guilty about ordering masks when they were saying, "Oh, don't wear a mask because the frontline people need them." I'm like, "Oh, well, good. I can just use these and not have to worry about it." Now I need to figure out how to stop sharing my screen.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to see some links we're not supposed to see.
Stop sharing. There we go.
There we go. Thank you, Patrick. Well, let's go to our first news story of the night from Mr. Paul Guzik. Paul, and I have a feeling this is a story that's going to resonate deeply with me.
Well, it's actually a story from a couple years ago that I came across while, I don't know, somehow I kept getting pictures of electric lawnmowers in my screens and looked into it. And basically the gist of it is those nasty gas-powered lawn equipment. And the reason I talk about it is the beginning of lawn care season. So some of you have to cut your lawn, use a leaf blower, use a weed whacker. But turns out that a lot of those, especially the older two-stroke things like weed whackers, are nasty ass polluters.
Okay.
They talk about in this article a half hour of use of a leaf blower with a two-stroke gasoline engine pollutes as much as driving a Ford Raptor pickup, which is not a Prius, for almost 4,000 miles. So from Texas to Alaska.
Texas to Alaska. That's the visual that drives home right there.
So if you have gas-powered lawn equipment and it's old, maybe it's time to upgrade it to lithium-powered stuff. There's some cool stuff on the market. You can have one battery system for all your different tools. Do a little research, and it's quieter, more efficient. Pretty cool stuff. So that's my story.
Less maintenance, less cost.
Less maintenance. No having to pull the cord and hope that it starts. They also said one of the problems with gasoline-powered lawn equipment is a lot of people spill the gas trying to put it into the equipment because they don't use a funnel. And that unburned gas is nastier than burned gas to the environment if it evaporates. That's why in California and a lot of states they have gas pumps that capture the fumes when you fill up the tank, because those fumes that escape into the environment are nasty for the environment. So
yeah, the amount of cancer you can give yourself just topping off your car is pretty impressive.
Yes. Unless you're in a state that has those capture devices over the fuel tank.
Also the grime on the handles.
Yeah. Now, interestingly enough, there's a few municipalities here in San Diego that have made gas-powered leaf blowers illegal, which, of course, the civil libertarians have decried the end of society, and that it's horrible, and their lawns are going to grow out of control. And the rest of us just went, wow, it's nice that it's quiet now, and it doesn't stink.
Is that the problem that they were trying to solve, was the noise? Because they are extremely loud, some of them.
Terrible.
It's noise and pollution.
My favorite is the leaf blowers. Why'd you have to rev it? Just hold it down. Or turn it off.
They're two-stroke engines with no emission standards controls on them. They're horrible.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And the lithium stuff is really cool. So
a friend of mine just invested in a system that you can buy. He bought an electric lawnmower. I want to say it's 48 volt. No, maybe it's an 80 volt. I don't know. It was something much higher than I expected. Anyway, the same battery powers their leaf blower, powers their vacuum, powers
The
their
weed whacker,
edger, the weed whacker. So it's really cool in that, you get a couple of batteries and you've got a whole system of stuff to use.
You can even run your lights when the power goes out for a minute.
Yeah, that's the system that I have. We have Greenworks, and I don't remember what voltage the battery is, but we have 2 batteries, and then you can swap them and have them have one on the charger while you're using the other, and we can do our whole lawn front and back even when it's the grass is wet and heavy, and it handles the job. Way back in our first house, I had a lead acid Black & Decker lawnmower, and that one didn't do so well. But this new lithium-ion one is a whole lot better. Yep.
Yeah,
well, and you could also use the leaf blower to do dusting inside the house.
No.
You can dry your
This
hair.
is a bad suggestion. I'm gonna definitely say no.
Or a speed dryer for outside laundry.
No.
I've used it to dry the car before.
And I'm not going to call this person out, but there was a wonderfully OCD article by a major internet automotive writer that was posted this last week. And as part of his, I want to say 1,600 word essay, he talks about how he dries his car with a leaf blower. And I said, I got nothing.
Hopefully it's electric.
Yeah. Nothing gas power.
Well, and I said, well, if the intake isn't filtered, you're just blowing dirt onto the car. And he's like, well, one of it's, whatever. But yeah, I mean, like, is a chamois that hard to use?
Well, that might involve effort. He'd have to use his hands. Whereas using a leaf blower means he's using a machine, even though he's making about the same level of effort. Gotta start thinking like a dude.
Car washes you drive through, they have like a giant leaf blower that
pulls
the water off the car at the end.
That's not a giant leaf blower.
It moves there.
Like many
it's not even close.
Hopefully the air is filtered. Hopefully.
Yeah. Otherwise, we just coated your car with a brand new coating of dust. Yay!
Good job.
Well, let's go to our next story. And for that, we're going to go to Mr. Schaefer.
Yeah, so as we know, Ford and Lincoln were partnered with Rivian to come out with their all-electric SUV. Oh, geez, did I use the past tense when I said that? So things have changed. We're living in a new world now, and not only are consumers not buying as many cars, they're not buying as many luxury SUVs, and they're certainly not buying many all-electric luxury SUVs. We know that, I showed you the gas prices here in the Chicagoland, northern Chicagoland, southern Wisconsin area was under $1 just a couple of weeks ago. Not a lot of people are out shopping for electric vehicles right now. And Ford and Lincoln are kind of contracting. And we've talked about Ford and Lincoln for the last couple of weeks. Their stock prices are tanking. Basically, their financial services are really the only arm that's keeping them afloat these days. So what they've decided to do is cancel the current order from Rivian to come out with the all-electric Lincoln SUV. And they say that the plans are still on the table. They're just not going to execute on those right now. But, you gotta wonder, they've invested a lot in Rivian. I want to believe that if things get back to a new normal, that they'll pick these plans up again. Matthew Klippenstein, who wasn't able to make it on this show, did a really good explanation on why Ford might be doing this. And of course, one of the reasons is, they have an infrastructure in-house, and there's a thought that in addition to just pushing the expensive SUV aside for now, they might choose to go with something more like their F-150 and maybe build on that platform, or just forego the whole thing altogether. There's not a lot of details. I'm reading this off of digitaltrends.com. But Matthew makes a pretty good argument as to the numbers have been slipping, and this probably isn't a good time to invest a chunk of change on electric SUVs. So something that had been hyped for many months, now Lincoln and Ford have pulled the plug.
One might say their electric plans were found on the road.
Oh.
Oh. I don't know. They're just going to keep finding excuse after excuse. It's sad.
I'm going to play devil's advocate on this one and say it kind of makes sense. I mean, I think we're going to head into a pretty hefty economic downturn. Granted, I don't think any of the money they're saving is actually going to go towards the line workers. Like I always say, you could cancel 2 or 3 executives and pretty much save 100 to 250 jobs. But I can say that this does make a bit of sense, and especially considering the story we have coming up, where we're going to talk a little bit more about that, about the sales aspect of electric vehicles. So there's my devil's advocacy for the day.
No, it's not a devil's advocacy. I mean, it's accurate. It really is. You know, like I said, you know, we've seen businesses are contracting these days. Even if we were to believe that Ford is completely gung-ho on their EV future, you know, they're just holding things close to their chest right now, as are a lot of companies.
Well, I'll give you a PSA. For the people that were waiting to buy a Ford SUV all-electric vehicle and are now disappointed it's not coming out, just go buy the Model Y. And I guarantee after 3 months, you won't care what Ford does or doesn't do in the electric vehicle segment going forward.
Yeah. After 3 months,
you'll be like, in a good way or a bad way?
Either way, you will not care.
That's what happened to me. I really wanted the Mitsubishi Outlander plug-in hybrid. And it was supposed to come to the U.S. in 2013, and I was all excited for it. And by 2016, I'd given up waiting, and I bought a Tesla Model X, and that I was so happy with that I think I think it worked out way for the best. I don't think I would have been as happy with the Outlander, and I guess now I'll never know. I'm a Tesla for life now. I love it.
Yeah.
Yep. I mean, Tesla wasn't even on my radar, and then it showed up. Then I made the mistake of driving one, and then then it was over.
Yeah. So great companies are defined by their actions during a tragedy, and they're defining themselves as gas car companies. That's what they're doing.
I think we're seeing that on a lot of the larger manufacturers. It's the mentality that it's, and I'm not projecting this onto them. I'm just speculating. It's okay to be adventurous and try new things in good times, but now we're in questionable times, and I think you're exactly right, Patrick. They're starting to cast the adventurous part aside and fall back on their bread and butter and what they've built on for the last 100 or so years. And
they don't have to do much custom engineering, training, or anything to keep selling F-150s out the door.
Yep. And they can just change the body panels and keep the same vehicle underneath like they did for the Crown Vic for 30 years.
Yeah. Just bend the sheet metal a different way and say, look, it's a new car.
Yep.
So now supports Apple CarPlay.
Oh.
Ooh, that's a technological advance.
Nice. Cool.
Yeah. So I mean, that's it. That's it for
I mean, it really would suck right now to be a new car company because ain't nobody going to be buying cars in the next year.
Yeah. On the average,
yeah. Yeah, compared to the last couple of years.
Yeah, the market will definitely contract significantly.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
the Wall Street term is take a shit.
Yeah, that's why we like to have Paul here.
And that,
give us all these
again,
technical terms.
Yeah, and again, we've talked about that for the last couple of weeks as well, how the entire automobile
I'm really disappointed that this month's investment in Faraday Future, according to you, is not going to be a good investment. Okay, that really hurts my feelings.
especially when a Bobcat rodeo.
I
Yeah.
want an FF91, baby.
They've
And
been on
it's-
Death Watch since we found out about them.
yeah, they're on Death Watch
That's
from
the
the
sad
start.
truth.
Let's go to our next story, and for that, we're going to go to Mr. Casey Green.
So, speaking of technology and forward-looking and contraction and all that, this is kind of a two-part story. So we're going to start with Volkswagen. Their CEO is worried that that Tesla has them beat on self-driving and software infrastructure.
Wow, I didn't think he was allowed to say that publicly. I mean, we all know that's true.
Well, the good thing is it's not public. It was a leaked email.
Okay.
These days, nothing is private.
Nothing else.
The board will kick his ass for that.
Not for long.
Yeah.
So why is that the important angle here, though?
Well, he actually
Oh, this is your
is
story.
kind
Go
of
ahead.
trying to
Case.
light a fire and get his team to play catch up,
I see.
rather than just kind of sitting back and retrenching. So that part was really cool to me, because like Patrick and Mark and I keep saying is we don't want Tesla to just run away with all the high tech stuff in the green. We want there to be other options, because without a check, they will probably be, instead of chaotic good, they'll become very evil.
Become? Okay.
Yeah.
They're chaotic good. So yes, they do some weird stuff, and then they do some bad stuff, and on average, they're progressing in the positive direction. But without that foil, they will be all over the map towards evil.
Yeah, so an external threat is definitely one way to motivate a company. And we saw this with the Volt in, was it Revenge of the Electric Car, or Who Killed the Electric Car? One those Bob Lutz was talking about how, it was Revenge of the Electric Car, that only because he could point to Tesla was he able to cut through a bunch of the naysayers and the bureaucrats within General Motors to make the Volt happen. And so this is a great way, if you have a company that where they're saying, no, we can't do that, that can't be done, you can point to some competitor and say, look, they are eating our lunch, we need to get off our ass, we need to stop doing things the way we've always done them, and be bold. So, yeah, good for them. I hope that they make some great vehicles out of it.
Yep, and they're getting a little bit of practice right now with that field of ID3s sitting out there that needed an update before they can go to sale, and hopefully they'll take all those lessons and do the right thing. I mean, these cars, once they get their update, there's nothing really stopping them from getting over-the-air updates or Wi-Fi updates at the very least. Or even like Ford did when Sync first came out. You take your USB stick and you shove it in the console and you wait. Something other than what you sold the car with is what it stays with forever. That would be awesome.
Yeah. A friend of mine had an electric Golf, and he's a software guy. He was not impressed with their software offering.
But speaking of more software, last week, very recently, Tesla released their public build of the beta of the stop sign and stoplight control beta. So had to get the order right, and I had the opportunity to take that out for a spin for a couple hours, and it's interesting because you can tell their technique is to have the driver label all of the stop signs and stoplights for them. The car's like, yeah, I see a stoplight. Is it there or is it not? And then based on how you respond, it kind of pre-labels it and sends it off to the queue to go get confirmed. And like they're not sitting still; they're a moving target. And this is pretty exciting because the only time that mine really failed was when I had a stop sign around the corner from another stop sign, around the corner from another stop sign.
Yeah, there are some weird intersections out there that are even difficult for humans to navigate. So it's there are going to be some failures. It is beta. If you're using it, pay attention. You're the responsible neural net behind the wheel, not the computer. So yeah, be safe.
Yeah, so it did. With that particular one, it got the first stop sign, and then it just kept stopping, and so I took over right there. And then on the city streets, it sees see some of the controls before you even arrive, like if they're covered by a big truck or you're coming around a hill. And others it doesn't see, and it reacts appropriately once it does catch them, and it's pretty smooth at the starts and the stops, and you can just see the potential there for when they start to unleash this thing, and that is exciting going forward into the future.
So, Casey,
I expect they could correct the database pretty quick with human input, right?
Yes. And then from those human inputs, if the data they're gathering is good enough, they can then say, 99.999% of the time, if it looks like this, it's a red light, and the stop bar is actually here instead of where it should be, or it's a turning lane. And then if they have whatever level of confidence they need, it can just automatically react instead of having to confirm with the user. What were you asking?
Casey, I'm just so you're using this beta software, and I would kind of appreciate, like, give me an idea of what it's like to drive with this software. Like, what when you say you have to confirm, what do you actually have to do? You're driving down the road.
Yes.
What happens?
So it's pretty cool. When they first described it to me, I was like, I'm going to try that for the video, and I'm going to be annoyed by it. I'm going to turn it off. And I found it to be quite the opposite. So what happens is when the car sees us, if you're in cruise control or in the auto steer, the car will stop at every traffic control it sees. So that'd be stop signs, green lights, yellow lights, and red lights. And
hopefully it's not stopping at the green lights.
If you are not doing your part, it will stop at the green light. And but because your part is to pay attention and make sure that the car is doing what it's supposed to be doing. So what you do in the legacy cars is you'll pull the autopilot stalk or push the accelerator pedal. And in the new cars, the Model Y and the Model 3, you'll pull down on the gear shift or push the accelerator pedal. And that will confirm what's going on. If you come up to a confirmed stop sign where the car is very sure it's a stop sign, and you try to override it, it won't run the stop sign until it hits 0 first. And that's pretty cool. What I did find in my release to 2020.12.6, 2020.12, yeah, .6, that same sometimes holds for red lights, but not always. So I was just kind of playing around, and the light was red. The car was stopped. It had the red lights on the screen, and it had the red stop bar. I'm going to stop here. And I pulled the lever, and it started to go out in traffic. I was like, no, brake. And at that point, I was like, well, I wonder what the criteria are to make this hold at the stop signs and the red lights. And so I was at another red light, and I pulled the bar again, and the car was like, no, dumbass, you're not going out into traffic. It just sat there.
Now, what about if you hit an amber light, can it gun it?
Yes,
and go through?
yes. And so it won't gun it, but if it thinks that you have time, it won't bother you, and it'll let you go on through it, assuming that you've already confirmed that there is, yes, I know there's a light on, yes, I want to proceed. But if you tell it yes, and it thinks the light's going to turn red, or the light does turn red, and it knows it can safely stop, it'll slam on the brakes, and it'll just stop right there. And that's pretty cool.
It'd be more fun if it gunned it.
It would be, but then somebody is going to say, "Oh, Tesla ran the light, not me."
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And
I kind of think of the AI as a preventative to the human tendency to gun it.
Exactly, and it's got a couple of different modes for stopping. If it's below 35 miles an hour, it's the smoothest, silkiest experience I've ever had. And if you are above 35 miles an hour, say 45, 50, depending on the roads and the stoplight, it gets a little aggressive and lasts a minute with the stops. But what I do like is now, if you come up upon an intersection and the car can already see the light is red, you saw it way back, and then there's traffic in front. Now, instead of trying to race to the light, it's going to actually take that input that it receives from the traffic and start slowing down gently instead of at the last minute, like, hey, why aren't you guys going on this road?
Oh, cool.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, that gives time for the light to change. You might even do some hypermiling there.
It does, and I've actually done a couple glides through the lights as they change. It's pull the trigger and it just picks up momentum.
We gotta get Tony to train the neural net for hyper miling.
Exactly. And then I found that on the takeoffs, depending on where you are and who's in front of you or not, is kind of hit or miss as far as if it's going to be super ginger or if it's going to be very aggressive. If you're in the front of the line, depending on what it's chosen for, I guess the same as when it slams on the brakes or gently comes to a stop, it'll take off like a normal person. Like the people around you are already taking off at that speed, at that reaction time, and it's like slower than I would do because I'm in a performance car and it's fun to just launch when you're in the pole position, but not enough that the people behind you are going to run you over. But I found that sometimes when you're behind somebody, it's a little extra cautious. Like it's assuming that they're going to either just wait on the light because they're texting on their phone, or it's assuming that they're going to take off like somebody's grandmother, and just go very slowly. And so it gives them a little too much of a gap. But I do find that it's not leaving room for people to cut you off as they go through the intersection, which is quite nice.
That is nice. We need an LA traffic mode where as soon as the light changes, it just starts honking. And
Yes.
Yeah.
New
So
York.
I had some friends, some coworkers, they were in Chicago, and they were in a rental car, and they were following me. Of course, I knew where I was going, and I told them, just stay on my bumper and follow me.
Yeah.
But they were not from an aggressive place. They followed me at such a distance, and I'm not making this up, I swear to you. They were so far behind me, a school bus merged between I'm like, really? Really? That was some following distance right there.
Yeah. Wow.
I could tell you in Florida that I've seen some really aggressive school bus drivers, but all I had to say was Florida there, really. So,
Yeah.
Not fair.
And so one of the other things that they did that they didn't put in the release notes is they have tweaked the smart summon feature a little bit further. It's very, very confident in itself, so it'll take corners faster than you would expect. And it's while I was demonstrating this, some birds took liberty with my car, and so I ended up with a baby wipe full of bird mess, and I didn't want to put it in the car, so I had the car follow me, and it was quite comical because it was like all those scenes in the movies where somebody gets out of the car and their significant other is like, no, get back in the car. They're just driving beside them. The car is just following me. It's like, I'm sorry, come on.
It sounds like a big mechanical pet.
Yeah.
Taking your car for a walk.
Yes. It does have a distance limit. Thankfully, the mall was closed, so when it decided to beat itself in the middle of the parking aisle up front, there was nobody to either cause a mishap or get royally offended. So,
the world's most expensive ambulatory Tamagotchi. Congratulations, Tesla. Congratulations.
But so I had to go somewhere for work yesterday at one of my work locations, and the parking spaces were way too narrow. Like every space was a compact car space. There was a Prius C that filled the space. And
Wow.
when I came in, it is a tiny spot. When I came in, it looked a little more spacious because the first couple cars I saw were Fiat 500s. Then I saw the Prius, and I was like, this is not going to end well. And I managed to find a space next to a Model S and some Audi. And so I parked. Well, first I let the car auto park, and then I realized that I hit the button and the door opened, but I didn't fit out. So I pulled it forward, got out with it in the middle of the lane. I pushed it back, and I was like, I hope that nobody has to leave before I do. And thankfully, I was the first one of that group to leave, and so I knew I didn't fit back inside the gap. So I called the car to me, and it was quite nice. But imagine if I had a wheelchair or crutches, or I think this is headed in the right direction.
There you go.
Yeah.
Tony?
I want to remind everyone that if you want to read the news that we're reading, make sure and check us out online. Shout out to Patrick Connor, who keeps our Facebook well populated with the news. You can find us facebook.com/whatdrivesus. Leave us comments, suggest news items. Make sure you like the page. Also, if you do use Flipboard as a news aggregator, Philip Barclay and I tend to throw various articles up there. We try to keep it fresh on an ongoing basis. And if you haven't yet, go ahead and like this video. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel, what the hell is wrong with you? Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications.
Tough love there.
Yeah, basically, yeah, you're really missing.
Exactly. And Tony, cheers, my friend, for use of the phrase fresh throw up in a way I'd never thought I'd hear. Thank you. That was truly a unique turn of phrase. And for another unique turn of phrase, let's go to Miss Georgia, who has some interesting news from a couple of different sources.
And I'm actually going to segue it by tacking on to that whole self-driving thing and saying, no way in hell am I ever going to use that unless I have an AI that can literally handle all the whole thing, and I feel really super confident. It speaks English. I mean, I have a Google Assistant and it can't understand me when I ask it, add something to my shopping list. So I would have a lot of trust issues with using this self-driving AI. And it turns out I'm not alone.
I'll beta test it for you.
The same thing was true when elevators went from being human controlled to automated. There were a lot of people saying, "Oh no, I will never do that." And today we all do it without thinking twice.
I think just going up and down is pretty simple. I'm waiting for a Baymax. I want a big robot.
Mm-hmm. And so do a lot of people.
I want a proper robot that gets my English, and I just don't feel we're there yet. But like I said, I'm not the only one. So this JD Power survey that talks about attitudes towards electronic cars and, well, towards electrical cars and also self-driving cars. The attitudes haven't changed since 1997. It's 2020, folks. What are we waiting for? Especially when you were talking about electrical cars. So what's the big takeaway? They don't think the technology is ready for self-driving cars. I'm going to raise my hand. I'm one of those people. They don't think that society is ready either. I think actually society is ready, and I think the technology for at least an electric vehicle, that's the infrastructure's there. I think we're on track. I think that we have a real obstacle to overcome, especially moving in from the coast and heading into central, Midwestern America and Southern America. But I don't think that that's a hard obstacle to overcome. And they're not sure about that whole public availability of the cars. I mean, we just talked about that truck that's no more. Rivian, gone. We're not doing that one anymore. And when we consider the fact that the market is still pretty tiny, it doesn't matter. I respect the Teslarati and all the Tesla fans, but you are a unique, an individual bunch of people. You're just a tiny subset of car drivers. So we're having a big problem getting people to change attitudes about buying. Hold up. What is this, New York?
Do we need to call the company lawyer?
Did somebody just walk into Costco without a face mask? Is that what you just heard?
I'm on the route to the hospital, and sadly every day now we're not bad over here, but every day I see that. So we've got a lot of work to do. I think manufacturers are not doing the kind of outreach they need to do. They're not hitting the price points they need to do for the average driver. The average driver cannot drop 40 to 50K for a sedan-styled car. Sorry. If they're spending that, they're getting an SUV because they feel, hey, I need a lot of space. I've got 3 kids. They do a lot of activities. They're getting a truck. If you want this to work, you're going to have to meet the largest market of consumers where they're at. And I think based on this survey, we can definitely say they're not up to the task. The Tesla image is one of a very high-tech, very slick, very forward-thinking kind of driver. Hey, you guys are all got a big compliment from me. So there you are. You're practically the James Bond of drivers. You're cool tech, but that's not everybody. Not everybody's looking around for cool tech with a car. They don't have that kind of income to spend on a car, and they can't have a car that costs that much, and they've got to put something like maybe 50 to 60 miles a day of driving just getting things done. And I don't really see a big solution coming out of any of this that doesn't involve finding a way to make for a mid-price car that starts at around 25,000, and really hammering home that these vehicles are here for you. They're great to drive. They're going to fit all your needs, and they're here. They're ready. Go drive them. I don't know what else to say.
I respect the skepticism on self-driving. That makes perfect sense. Having driven a car that's as advanced as possible for consumers right now, I can see it. And if you're not paying attention, it will kill the shit out of you, just like a regular car will, except that you thought it was controlling it. But this with the EVs is very disheartening. Because we've got these guys, we can see that it can be done. We've got you're driving one, and you can see that it's being done. But the smear campaign against EVs, the manufacturers' reticence to actually do the right thing, and they keep coming out with these expensive whiz bang. A lot of them are ugly cars.
Yeah.
Well, and the dealer training is just god awful.
If they don't have it with flat tires in the back, unplugged with a 2% battery.
Yeah, you can't test drive an EV. I know when I went shopping, I couldn't get into an EV without making a prior appointment. I don't want to make a prior appointment.
And even then, they might still not even do it right. Like, oh yeah, and then you get there and you're like, it's still where it was. Like, I called you yesterday. What the hell?
I saw one that I wanted to look at, and they actually didn't even have the keys for it. What?
They had a day to find the keys. Make new ones.
When the first gen Volt came out, I went with a friend to test drive one. And the dealer said, well, we have a Volt, but it's not charged, but you can drive it as a gas car. And like,
what's the point?
If I wanted a worse Prius, I would drive an old Prius.
Yeah.
I wouldn't,
and they just didn't get it, so we walked out of that dealership.
Yeah. Some of the numbers that came out of this survey were absolutely shocking.
They really are.
If you look at the number of people with experience in electric vehicles, 70% of American respondents had never been in a battery electric vehicle.
Whoa.
And 75% of people surveyed said that they didn't trust the technology. And we're not just talking self-drive. We're talking the cost.
It's across the board.
And it's mentioned here, the entire across the board that, I'm a Top Gear fan, and I saw Jeremy's car run out of battery, and he had to push it back to the garage, and so therefore I don't trust them anymore. Clarkson's such an asshole. But they don't trust the battery. They don't trust the
buy a hybrid
technology
because they think when the battery poops out, you're stranded on the road.
Yeah,
right.
And it costs $10,000.
This technology, electrics and hybrids, is over 100 years old.
Okay. Yeah. Let me take the other side of this. Knowing that I support the product category fervently, let's go back to like when I first dived into this category in 2005 and got my first Prius, which at the time, we're talking about a car that was already 5 years on the market, okay? Didn't have huge market penetration, but it had already been out 5 years. People used to come up to me and stop me and go, does that go over 35 miles an hour? I heard they're like golf carts. I used to get like crazy questions. 5 years after a major
where do you plug it in?
Right. Oh, all kinds of just bizarre, like it won't run when it's cold, right? And I'm in the snow in Lancaster, Pennsylvania.
Dude, right there with you.
We're standing in the snow.
Oh, you can't go on long trips with that. I'm sitting here with South Carolina plates in the middle of Michigan.
People need more time and more experience. How do we get, and I guess this is one of those messaging failures that I think manufacturers have absolutely screwed the pooch on over just over the whole life of electrical vehicles on the market. How do you screw up this technology and just getting people to transfer over to it
on purpose?
Just on purpose. I mean, everything's a luxury vehicle. You don't combat the fact that people do think, it doesn't go over 35. I mean, that's so old for electrical vehicles.
Yeah.
Long since passed.
The original one did 28.
Yeah.
100 years ago.
Yeah.
So
And,
how do
you
we
know,
deal with that?
Well, of course, we're the spearhead, and we're the tip of the wave. We're cutting edge, and,
The
but
early adopters.
we really are the early adopters.
But it's not
And
early.
Yeah, it's like
No,
no,
we are.
hold on,
20-year-old
stop,
early
stop.
adopters.
I know.
Tony talk.
We were, and that's where I was going. We were early adopters 15 years ago.
Yeah.
Like Russell said, we've all been stopped and asked about hybrids, about batteries, about all of this. And we took the time to educate the people because we realized that 9 times out of 10, they weren't asking these questions because they were snarky.
Right.
They were asking the questions because they were ignorant of the technology. And so everybody had a day one, right? Everyone has when they're new to something. And so it was up to us. And we would go to car shows and we would talk to people who were looking at hybrid vehicles, not as a representative from the manufacturer, but as an owner. And they would listen to us because we were owners. Madison, Wisconsin, Eric Powers had the Green Drive Expo and Hybrid Fest, and we would go to that, and it was part of the Dane County Fair, and we got all kinds of public, foot traffic. People asked questions, and we took the time to sit down with them and educate them and show them and tell them how happy we were and how pleased with them. And we'd like to think that we won people over, but we, the 6 of us, can only affect a very small population. And it really is up to the manufacturers to have this sort of outreach, to not have the uncharged vehicle with the flat tires in the back, to not be General Motors bashing the Prius, referencing the Sudbury mine, the ashes to ashes Hummer survey or whatever thing. And then they come out with a Volt and they're being attacked with their own FUD.
Yeah.
Yeah, they really did screw the pooch on this. I understand why people are ignorant of the technology and why they don't even want to take a test drive in an electric vehicle, because it's the manufacturers themselves who've been funding these think tanks to undermine the entire whatever arena or
The entire market.
Yeah.
market. Yeah.
And I'm going to point out one simple thing. We all have to sit here and endure those god-awful, stupid, I bought you a massive luxury vehicle for Christmas commercials.
Yes.
Has anybody done that for an electric car? Not even that. The traditional, out of reach, hey, look, I bought you a Beamer for Christmas, because everybody does that.
With the big red bow on the top.
With a big red bow on top. No one. I've never seen a car for an electrical vehicle that had a focused marketing plan that made it seem like a desirable luxury gift, even if it wasn't luxury priced. I haven't seen that.
Yeah.
So what's going on with that marketing budget, fellas?
Worse than that is finally somebody took them to task about it, but you've got Lexus over in Europe finally got their wrist slap for saying the self-charging EV. No, it's not a perpetual motion machine. It's a gas car.
Gas car.
Mm-hmm.
Sadly, the one, and this isn't a slap at them, so don't get defensive, but sadly, the one company that makes electric cars doesn't advertise. And that's what this is in need of, this product category. And I'll liken it to the gay rights, the gay civil rights that we saw over the last decade. What happened was a lot of gay people came out because there was a lot of pressure inside gay groups to come out, to be public. And as soon as lots of people discovered, hey, you know what? My friend, coworker, cousin, uncle, niece, nephew, whatever, and is gay, all of a sudden their attitude started to change about should these people have equal civil rights in this country. Same thing with hybrids. And look at hybrids are still, Paul. People come in and are like, oh, I don't want one of them ding dang hybrids because it's got batteries and they're going to blow up or something. This is technology that has been deployed for 20 years. It is bulletproof. It is rock solid. I know. I love throwing in the ding dang once in a while.
More than 20 now. 1998.
There are 16 million hybrids on the planet running around doing things. But people are still a little like they kind of get that the Prius is somewhat reliable, but it's still a kind of a foreign concept. So we're very early in that adoption curve, and we have a lot of work to do. We can't assume that because we know everything about it, everybody else does. And these car companies, Ford, Chevrolet, Chrysler, General Motors, to not just let the rest of the GM, have to do that work too. You know, it's not enough just to make the car. You have to educate. You have to spend the money to advertise. You have to get these cars out there. It's not going, just like every other vehicle that they launch, people don't come to it magically. They have to create a demand, and they do, and they spend millions to create that demand.
But what I think is going to happen is if they don't step up and do it now while they are still the incumbent, they're going to get their lunch eaten by Rivian, by all of these little guys that are going to advertise. Tesla's probably not going to advertise until they have days of inventory sitting on the ground.
Maybe they should.
They should, at least for customer education and
customer education. Who always said all boats rise on a high tide?
Exactly. And thankfully we've convinced Musk to at least consider the idea to at least do an education campaign. He won't do it on the TV, so I'm curious to see where and how he does it, and to make sure he gets out in front of people, because he doesn't like Facebook, and that's going to be where you meet most of these people because they haven't seen it yet. It's just... I'm curious how it goes. It needs to be done.
And one thing that we saw in the hybrid world and the Tesla world is people going for a ride in other people's hybrids or EVs wakens them up.
Yes.
So why doesn't Tesla have a program for Uber drivers? Say, hey, we'll lease you a car at a decent price to do your Ubering, because you're exposed. Well, not right now, but when the world gets back to normal, a couple dozen people a day that may have never been in an electric car, and you can tell them that it's the shit. And step on it, and they'll go, "Holy cow, that's pretty!"
They do every time.
Yeah.
And that would do way more than putting an ad on the Super Bowl.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
And butts in the seats.
People got to get their butts in the seats of these vehicles to experience it.
Yeah. And that's why I
have a guy who works with us. He has a Model 3, and he happily takes people out for rides, and everybody comes back with a big ass grin on their face, saying, "I didn't think they were that cool." Now I get it.
Yeah.
I have
a couple things to say on this one.
Yeah, so I got a friend he's a lead foot. He owns several high horsepower vehicles, a couple of Shelbys. Yeah, I know he's got a Ferrari and a Morgan and a Jaguar I-Pace, because he rode in one and absolutely fell in love with it and just straight up bought one the next day.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, this is certainly a story, that I think we all agree. There's a lot of effort. This isn't just stupid people, although God knows there's a lot of them out there.
Some of that out there, yeah.
Ignorance is not the same as stupidity, yeah. So, Russell, I did want to say, I agree with you in that compared to the LGBT community, yes, we're a minority, and yes, awareness is important, but we're not fighting for our basic human rights, or not to be bullied or abused or even murdered in some cases. So I agree with your analogy, but I think that I don't want to belittle their struggle, which is far more important than what kind of right. Yeah, and I know you didn't mean it that way, but I just want to put that out there.
Absolutely. No, I'm not. I'm using
catch.
I'm using that as an example of the way you change attitudes in a large group of people.
Right. Yeah. Totally.
And just 200,000 people owning and driving one of these cars isn't enough.
Right.
Yeah. But I also have to say that you're right. 200,000 isn't enough. But you know what? We started at 3. The momentum has started. We are now taking percentages off the purchase of all vehicles. I think in some cases, for example, in British Columbia, they hit 9 and 10% of new vehicles sold. There are anomalies on the coasts that have larger percentages. And the actions that we and others have taken to get butts in seats have basically done that. I think that over time, as it continues to grow organically, it's just going to pick up steam. It has to. It's done that already over the past 10 years. In the next 10 years, we're going to go another step beyond that, another increment above. So I don't think all hope is lost. I just think that even without the car manufacturers advertising, I think we're heading in that direction anyways. It's just that if they added their push to it, it would go even faster.
I think that's true.
The fundamental problems that we've gone through is, okay, they don't have very much range. They look weird. They don't have good performance. They're just golf carts or milk floats, depending on what country you're in, and they're expensive. So these are all slowly getting ticked off. They're not all solved, but I mean, you can pick any few that you want, and you can get a car that has a lot of great features, and then it's expensive, or you can get a car that's cheap, but then you don't have as much range. So, and if you look at where we were in 2012 versus where we are now, there are a lot more options. They're a lot more affordable for what you get, and that is just going to continue. One of the things we talked about on this show was how hybrids went along and sort of plateaued. They really never got past 3%, but electric cars have potential to cross the chasm. And if you look at the adoption curve of technology, that getting from 10% to 18% is the valley of death. And a lot of products don't make it through that. But the momentum is there, the technology is improving. And I think it's because the vehicles are fundamentally better. They're quiet, they're smooth, things that you pay thousands of dollars extra for in gas cars come free here with torque. And it's by 2025, when we have even better batteries than we have today that are much more affordable, the cars are going to be incredible.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Just like with lawn equipment.
I think that's a good place to end that otherwise story that could take the next hour discussing it further, because it's huge. And George, you did a great job of rolling that out. I mean, again, this is we're all of us on this show are neck deep in this product category, you know, and have been for a long time. But I think sometimes we lose sight of how much work we have to do ahead of us yet. And the manufacturers have to do. They have to get cars out there. They have to get cars in dealerships and all of that. Anyway, for our final story, let's go to Mark Coughlin, who's waited patiently throughout the entire show.
Okay, the story that I have relates to Rivian again. It's kind of a good news story. Rivian, of course, has set up shop in Normal, Illinois, a small town in southern Illinois. And they purchased a factory a brownfield that was there with a factory on it. They've repurposed it to be their headquarters, their main manufacturing building. And they had a deal with the county, the town of Normal, Illinois, that they would spend X amount of capital by 2022. And if they were able to do that, the county, the town would contribute $1 million grant to them for their efforts. And they actually achieved that goal earlier this year. So 2 years ahead of schedule, they were able to achieve the goal that they've invested in that plant, in that property, in that manufacturing. And it was announced today by their president that they felt that the $1 million grant that was to be given to them by the contract, they don't want to accept it. They want the town to spend that money on services for the community as opposed to them taking the $1 million grant. So fantastic move by them, a great PR too. So definitely our hats off to them. During this crisis, monies, as we know, are being bled out the door on many things as we try to battle this health crisis. And I'm sure $1 million in extra spending power for the town, for the county would be much appreciated. So hats off to Rivian for this announcement.
It's a beautiful thing, man.
Considering how many very, very well-off companies with fat bank accounts were caught with their hands in the picky jar for small business loans meant to keep small businesses afloat through this time. This is welcome news. I know there's going to be somebody, well, it's $50 million. Yeah, but you know what? It's going to go to people for whom even probably $100 to $100,000 is just what they need to make it over this hump. And I think we should always praise good behavior wherever we can find it. So fantastic.
Yeah, dude, I can tell you that when Mitsubishi shuttered the iMe factory in the Bloomington Normal, the entire area, it shook the entire area, the amount of people that it employed. And when Rivian said we're looking for a factory, they petitioned them hard to get Rivian to come in, even, including the $1 million promise. And they were like, hey, if you put in 20 million, we'll give you one, because it was really all they could spare. And there were a lot of skeptics about Rivian, but as we know, Rivian's taking orders from Ford and Lincoln and Amazon, and other people have billions in investments in Rivian. And so it's great that they can give back, because I'll tell you, just being here in the Chicagoland area, I mean, I'm relatively familiar with the iMe factory, and a friend, Joe McAlucky, who lives in Bloomington. The community loved the iMe, and they loved the Mitsubishi factory. And when Rivian came in and pretty much hired almost all the people back and repurposed the factory, they already had the community behind them. And this is just one more thing of entrenching themselves in the community and just winning over the hearts of the Bloomington Normal area. I mean, this is it's a really good feel-good story.
It is indeed. Okay, that's it. The 60-minute clock is the little bird or whatever, the Flintstones. Wasn't that a bird? They went at the end of the ship. The bird has tweeted or whatever. Let's do some shout-outs and go home. Let's start with Mr. Paul Guzik.
Just want to say, hey, everybody, support your local small businesses if you're allowed to go out of your home or do takeout, delivery. People like us, our repair shop is open and servicing customers. So. And if you're in Colorado, check us out at boulderhc.com.
There you go, boulderhc.com, your source in the Front Range for everything hybrid and EV.
Bring him a six-pack.
Bring him Always bring your mechanic a six-pack, unless they're recovering, and then maybe don't do that. But
and
Paul's
bring him pastries or something.
Yeah, ice cream is nice.
Bring him something.
Bring him something.
You'll get a better deal. Trust me.
It's like tipping a server, It's a little extra and it pays off.
Better service.
Mr. Connor, let's go for you next, sir.
Sure. I've got two plugs to do tonight. So friends of the show, John Volker and Chelsea Sexton, are going to be appearing in a virtual webinar with some friends from Plug in America and Forth, a local Oregon organization, is organizing all of this. And they are going to discuss what the future is for EV sales in America, how COVID-19 has impacted that, and strategies for accelerating the electrification of transportation. And so you can find that on Forth, their website. So I'll send Russell a link and we can put it in the show notes. How about that?
Absolutely.
And then the other plug I have is, by the time you're seeing this, it's about to happen in a few minutes here, but by the time you see this, it's already done. The president of the Oregon Electric Vehicle Association, Gary Exnar, has been asked to appear on a live broadcast on YouTube and Facebook Watch with a mayoral candidate for Portland named Ozzy. So if you search for their channel, it's Ozzy for PDX. And he wants to talk about solutions, not problems, to a bold new future. And so we're going to be talking about electrification transportation in the Portland area.
Cool.
All right.
Yeah. That's
Right
my
on.
plugs.
Good plugs. Casey Green.
So I've got that video I was talking about where the car follows me like a puppy, and it stops at stoplights. You can find that at youtube.com/CaseyGreen. That's KACEYGREEN. And then at some point in the near future, I'll have my latest software update videos as well. After I go out and see them.
Thank you very much. Georgia, it's all yours.
Why, thank you so much, Mr. Frost. Once again, remember to like and subscribe to our channel. And I got nothing much to shout out except to you, lovely people who listen to us. That's it.
Ah, thank you. And you can hear Georgia on the Ostium podcast?
Yep.
So search
Cussing
Ostium.
and fighting. Cussing and fighting things.
Not really. Oh, good. Well, there you go. And even feistier, Georgia McKenzie. And speaking of feisty, Mark Coughlin.
No, not really.
Mildly feisty.
Mildly.
Mild-mannered Mark Coughlin.
We'll if you have interest in EVs and EV news, you can also check out our podcast, the
Tesla Life.
The Tesla Life, and also our local EV association, Riva, WREVA, has put out another monthly update. So you can see that on our YouTube channel as well. Check it out if you have some time.
Do search the Tesla Life on YouTube. Follow the Tesla Life on Twitter to get all the updates and stuff. And if you go to youtube.com and search the Tesla Life show, you can see people like Patrick and Casey on the Tesla Life. So it'll be like double your Patrick and Casey and Mark quotient.
Content.
Wow. Yes. Enthusiastic Tesla owners, we love to do this stuff. That's where they get their advertising.
See?
That's right.
But it's not enough. But
that's right.
Advertising to Tesla owners. It's a little late at that point.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, Tony Schaefer, you know your role here. Bring us home, my friend.
Yeah, I want to remind everyone that if you have the opportunity, please, once more, support your local, your restaurants, your microbreweries, your local everything. If you can, buy gift cards. Give them the money now. They need it. You know you're going to be going back to them when you have the opportunity. And one thing that I learned recently is places like Grubhub really fleece the restaurants. So, you know, you've been cooped up. So just go pick it up yourselves and cut out the middleman and make sure that the vendor themselves is getting all of the money.
Yeah.
All right. So we really, at this point, need to get back into the habit of watching out for each other.
Yep, that's what I was doing in that picture I showed. I was going to pick up dinner at a local restaurant and doing takeout and tipping well, which I normally don't do for takeout, but I certainly am today in these circumstances.
Yes.
Yeah. And look at it from this perspective. When you get to dress up like a masked bandit and go into a business, now you can do it. Now you're encouraged to do it. So put on the mask, put on the gloves, the bandana, the hood, the ninja thing. Go drop a couple of extra bucks at your coffee place or your restaurant or whatever. They appreciate it. They need it.
Yeah,
and it's a good thing.
If you've never worked,
just don't wear that uniform into the bank.
Right. Don't.
Yeah.
I got
so
nothing.
yeah, those of us who have worked food service understand that most food service employees are paid poorly and they work on tips. So to Patrick's point, they would have been tipped well during normal times, and now that you can't come in and sit down and order, let's say, a beer on tap or a food at your table, they're losing the tips, which means they're not getting paid as much. So make sure to tip as though you were eating there. Also, okay, so I don't know where you got this episode. If you're watching it on YouTube, I know exactly where you got it. You're on YouTube. But if you're listening to it, you know, go ahead and subscribe. We're on iTunes and Google Play, TuneIn, Spotify, Stitcher. Subscribe to all of them. What the hell? Just give us a couple more likes.
And some good reviews.
I like that.
Yeah. You know, I don't know that we've had a new review in like 4 years.
Since the 60s.
What are you waiting for, people? Yeah. Give us our reviews. Some 5 stars.
I get it. We're not worth writing about. As always, I want to thank Michael Manring for his amazing theme music and you as a trusted, loyal What Drives Us supporter and listener, want to thank Michael Mannering as well. Go to Bandcamp, search Michael Mannering, buy his new album, Small Moments, or buy a song from it. That is a great way to make sure that an artist gets direct support from you, and we appreciate it, and I know Michael appreciates it. So please, Michael's brand new record, Small Moments, has been out since the first. Go buy a song or go check it out. It's actually a great record. I shouldn't say actually. It really is a great record. So listen to it for free on Spotify. It's okay, and then buy it. As always, thanks to him. Visit him at manthing.com. You can visit us at What Drives Us all over social media, whether it's Facebook or Twitter. You can support us directly at patreon.com/whatdrivesusshow. And that's all I got, other than to thank this amazing panel. And I never know where I'm going to be in the little stack, so I'm not sure who I'm pointing to right now. Like, am I pointing to any? It's not the Brady Bunch, folks. But nonetheless, yeah, thank you, Mike. That was good. Oh, yeah. Thanks to all of you. And, of course, thanks to each and every one of you. You're the reason we do this show. Tune in next week and find out what drives us.
Stay safe. Stay charged.
Wash your hands.
Wash your hands, yeah. And stay safe, of course. See you next week, everybody.
See ya.